Hey there, welcome to episode 52 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. Recording this on the afternoon of February 22nd, 2024. The 52nd episode, actually episode 53, of our first season. And we'll end our first season with a very special episode, as they say. The Fallacy of Community. Today's episode, we will be discussing a recent suicide that took place in the Greater Vegas area. A well-known person who was part of the downtown project, the Entrepreneurial Innovation Ecosystem, arguably, although not so much in recent years. But it does raise an interesting point when you are talking about an ecosystem, the things that nobody mentions. So if you are concerned about this topic, if you are troubled by it, do be aware. It will not make up the entire episode, but it will be a topic of discussion today. As with most topics, a guest or guests in the future to continue this conversation rather than a monologue will be ideal. And as part of season 1, if today is the final episode of season 0, during season 1 we will endeavor to have more guests, any guests, to discuss these sorts of things. While there has been plenty of attention paid to the Greater Vegas area for a variety of reasons, the entrepreneurial ecosystem as it was during the days of the downtown project, and as well as today, lacks sufficient attention paid to the health and well-being of its inhabitants. A community is a community, if we may use that word, because everybody says it is, right? That was my summary from the show notes. So that's what we'll talk about today. There are some links in the show notes. The first two are my usual self-promotion, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. These are links to my various projects and programs. Do check that out. You do not need to buy me a coffee. Yeah, there's no obligation to spend any money, but I do use that as a sort of a central hub of links. I'm actually not a huge fan of the content editing tools they provide, but it works as a way station between the real world and my various undertakings. So the usual there, I'll cut it short today for this more important topic. I've included some links for suicide prevention and related resources. One is the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention has a resources page. I've also linked to the Crisis Support Services of Nevada website. Again, more resources. There's I'm clicking around, sorry. The CDC has some resources as well. And do be aware if you are in Nevada, or this may vary depending on where you are, but in Nevada, certainly in southern Nevada, there is a 988 service available. There's a website, 988lifeline.org. That's probably the easiest place, especially in the midst of a crisis, the easiest place to go, or dial 988 on your phone. If you do not have 988 service where you are, you will almost certainly be routed to a 911 dispatcher. To be honest, I have called that number for a person whom I believed was in crisis. It was not me. And so calling on behalf of another is fine. And in that case here in Clark County, I was routed to the same dispatch center as a 911 call. So you'll have to determine at the time what actually happens. And this may vary wherever you actually are. So be aware, but 988 is the designated phone number for crisis support. There are two other links that are not related to this. The bandwagon fallacy. I have a link to a fallacyfiles.org website concerning the bandwagon fallacy, which I believe applies whenever we use the word community. There is no such thing as a free lunch. This is an expression that should be more common than it is, although it is fairly common. There's a Wikipedia page on the origins and various cases where that has either been used or applies. Nothing is for free. So very briefly, I'm not going to provide the name or details. If you know who the person is, then you know. If you don't, it is another person who didn't make it, so to speak. So I will not say their name. I will refer to this person as Pat, a nice androgynous name. Pat took their own life in early February 2024, earlier this month. It happens everywhere and can happen at any time. From my experiences here in the Greater Vegas area for 10 years, I will say that there has been insufficient attention paid, perhaps, to the health, mental health mostly, of the group of people who participated in or were adjacent to the downtown project. I'm circling the downtown project, A, because this person, Pat, was involved with that. B, because the downtown project had several, more than zero suicides, either from people participating directly working for the downtown project, participating in the downtown project as a startup founder, entrepreneur, or adjacent, interacting with and being geographically proximal or even in the downtown project region. There were too many. And personally, my view, there was not enough done during, and I will not suggest that there was nothing done, but there can always be more. And to be honest, it isn't necessarily systemic. It is the community itself, if there is one. So the things to take away from this particular situation as an unfortunate addition to the roles, the list of unfortunate ends. There are a few things that we can take from this, and we could have taken these things each time this sort of situation unfolds. Will it happen this time? Unlikely, but it is something to think about, and that's what we'll talk about. So the person, like I said, I'm going to call this person Pat, although you know who it is. If you do know, you know. Pat was proactively engaged in the downtown project in many ways, always present, an actual name, who that would have been well recognized and generally well regarded. Pat was an entrepreneur and became more a part of the downtown project itself in its early days. The early days of it becoming more public, I should say. I moved to the Greater Vegas area 10 and a half years ago, August 1st, 2013. So been here just over 10 years. I would say I met Pat 6 months in, so 10 years ago, give or take. At the time, Pat was still operating the business that they co-founded. Within a year, I believe Pat would become more directly associated with Downtown Project. Not blaming Downtown Project itself, by the way, just setting up some context. After the fact, so after the news has traveled directly or word of mouth or various social media platforms, the remembrances, the memorialization of Pat as a happy person, a substantial contributor to the Downtown Project, to the quote-unquote community, always making people smile, always having a smile, always contributing, always making, enabling, etc. Only the good, which is common. I'm not complaining. I'm not diminishing that. It is always great to be remembered for the good. Pillar in the community, to be sure, was Pat. There's a problem, though, with these simplified memories once we allow them to settle. As I said, I met Pat nearly 10 years ago. Pat was a heavy drinker. A lot of people were. I myself would enjoy the trappings of the downtown Vegas area, especially once I was working remotely, so that my weekends, which were basically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, were in Vegas, and there were no coworkers or colleagues. There were no meetings to be had in person, so it was all too easy to once on the ground in the Vegas area to partake and to get to know people and to socialize and more in terms of drinking mostly. We had a lot of bar friends, and Pat was certainly one of them. Is frequently behaving outside of social norms. I witnessed Pat get into a fist fight with someone. They did not fare well. There were times when I invited Pat to meetings, engagements, important engagements, where Pat was behaving inappropriately, had obviously been drinking. I'm not trying to attack Pat's character. I'm setting a context. There was clearly something going on. There was a problem. Social drinking is interesting. It can be fun. This was drinking before meetings, before engagements relating to work, relating to the success of different components within the so-called community. This becomes important. And this is unfortunately not a secret that no one knew about. So I invited Pat to fewer important engagements and eventually distanced myself outside of social engagement now and then, perchance. Later in the timeline, Pat would depart his relations with the Downtown Project. It wasn't necessarily under terms Pat wanted, so there was angst and frustration, which Pat expressed to me when we met for lunch at Spiegel's, in fact. Siegel's. A restaurant in the El Cortez. Siegel's. Sorry, not Spiegel's. Siegel's. It's been a while. We met, we discussed. There was a lot of frustration and anger. This happens. This is how work unfolds. Work was very clearly a very important aspect of Pat's life. So Pat and I had similar conversations through the time that Pat was with the Downtown Project and now after, regarding various components of the mantle placed upon his shoulders of being a leader and being well known and frequently recognized. And, well, there was more to the story than smiling and enabling. I'm not quite sure why Pat chose to confide in me these things. I would hope that Pat also confided in others. I'm not really sure. Finally, there was an opportunity for Pat. Pat reached out to me to collaborate, work together for another person for whom Pat had worked while with the Downtown Project. We had lunch. We had a discussion. There was a little bit of confusion, communication, clarity about the role, the situation. This led to some uncomfortable phone conversation, uncomfortable for no reason. There is a rambling Colonel Kurtz-like voicemail message I received, possibly while driving, possibly having been drinking. The message was rambling and quite strange. I was more than a bit concerned. However, Pat, when we spoke next, was even more angry and frustrated and vitriolic. I chose at that time to step away from, pursuing the opportunity, which only made Pat more angry. This was very frustrating for me. It was not a good situation. It's not one I wanted to pursue. I felt it was better for me, possibly also for Pat, if we ended the conversation there. Shortly after that, I ran into Pat in a public place, had to fend off Pat's physical engagement, a minor physical altercation. It's clear that it was in a bar, ironically. So it was very clear Pat had been drinking quite a bit. So I pushed Pat away. I said, no, don't do that. Get away from me. I would later contact his employer, alert them to the fact that this behavior was very clearly related to the discussions we had and perhaps their ending, and that I would certainly escalate this situation should it continue. So I advised the employer, Pat's employer, to take action of some sort. My final words to Pat were, we do not engage. No texting, no emails, no in-person conversation, no handshakes if we encountered each other in public, no nothing. And that was generally true from that point on. Something I know little about, but it's something I have heard from people who have been in crisis. There's a public self, a private self, and a secret self. I would posit that Pat's public self is the one being memorialized, happy, supportive, proactive, always around to lend a hand, elevating the community and so on. Then there was the private self, which is the self I believe I interacted with. Certainly the frustrations and angst and disappointment expressed about the way the timeline unfolded with Downtown Project. Later, the intensely negative interactions about that next project, collaboration opportunity. So the private self can be disturbing, can be uncomfortable. Occasionally, it's one that people are aware of, but to varying degrees. And then there's the secret self. The secret self is the self that makes the final decisions about such things. Only the closest of family and the very closest of friends will have any awareness of a secret self. But even then, the secret self is often very secret. Okay, so now let's talk more generally. Let's leave Pat to memory, but let us learn from it. And the first thing I will say is consider the argumentum ad populum. Everybody says so. Everybody agrees. When we use words like community and community building, these make it seem as though they're a group of people that meets once each month, perhaps, for snake oil pitches, networking transactions, and free lunch is a community. However, some might take that word and they may add meaning to it. And this, in fact, is a discussion I had with someone from the Downtown Project. We had a podcast episode early on in season 0. We've had this conversation in person. The word community means different things to different people. It will sometimes imply a support infrastructure that may or may not exist. It is a word that may connote a sense of safe or caring, where in fact it is a sense of transaction and individual pursuit. Google, if you Google the term community, and they use Oxford language as their information source to present 2 definitions on the initial results. There are some other nuanced definitions, but provided by Google and elsewhere, if you visit the Oxford English Dictionary website, etc. A group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. That is the most basic sense of community you can get. Commune. Second, a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. Both of these are fairly person-centric, really, when you think about it. A community of people living in the same place and having particular characteristics in common. This is from the perspective of each individual person. You in a community may see others as similar to you, geographically or otherwise. So, of course, it's very easy to believe you are in a community. Do you have a feeling of fellowship with these other people? Maybe. That one is a little bit more nuanced, and it's a little bit more about the interaction component. That first one is a group of people. Remember, do you find yourself in a community? Do other people believe that they are in a community? If you have a feeling of fellowship with others, often it is remembering what you talked about last time. It's sometimes that simple. If you're having a conversation and then next month you meet again and that person asks, how did that thing turn out? How's the project going? Ooh, I must be in a community. People care what I'm talking about. They care what I'm working on. Do they? Are they merely reflecting their own desire for people to listen to what they're doing, to their stories, their pitches, to show an interest? Not trying to be too much of a downer, but it's an honest question to ask yourself. Are you in a community? You may well be in a community, but do you and the other members of this community agree on the definition of community? Do you believe that the people in your community would stand up for you in a difficult situation? Would they vote for you in an election? Would they vote for you because they know you or because they believe in you? Because they believe in what you're trying to accomplish? Is it a shallow community or a deep community? If you speak to any veteran anywhere, they will probably have a slightly different definition of what a community is. Fellowship would be an understatement. There's a commonality that unites, connects, almost unifies. Thank you, Amazon. Almost unifies any group of veterans, the veteran community is one to examine. But there is a risk that any one person, either in the veteran community or anywhere, may believe there is more than meets the eye, which may or may not be true. A scenario which may become apparent after the fact, after it's most critical. I will say, for example, speaking of veterans in particular, which I am not one, I was having a conversation with a City of Las Vegas employee who is focused on veteran connection with health services when they become involved with the court system, so that a medical issue doesn't turn into a criminal issue. When I spoke to her, I asked, because she was making it clear that oftentimes PTSD, for example, not recognized, not apparent to the untrained eye. So someone may be behaving in ways that could be treated rather than prosecuted. And I asked, I've even been to the MCRD in San Diego when I was in ROTC. I have seen training. If you are in some branches of the military, part of your boot camp involves experiencing tear gas or similar, so that you know what it feels like. If you're going to be a pilot, they will put you in a hypobaric chamber so that you know what it's like when your oxygen equipment is not working, when you are feeling hypoxia, what to do about it, how to recognize it, and so on. So I said, do they train anyone on PTSD? And to her knowledge at that time, within the last 2 years, she said, nope. When you separate or retire from the military, under whatever circumstance, you're essentially on your own. It is up to you and the people around you to recognize these symptoms, the behaviors. There's very, very little in the way of information or training or instruction. So you're kind of left to your own devices. I would say the same is true 10 times over for a casual community of people who gather because they are all creating startups. They all are looking for clients. They're at a meetup. They're sharing their business cards and they're pitching their wares. Is that a community? Can we learn together for each other? Each time there's a catastrophically bad event, whether it's a suicide or general anything along these lines, anything that's catastrophically bad, that's the word. There is a time for reflection and learning, but does that even happen? Reflection, probably. Memorial, yes. Remembering the good times, the smiling face, posting photos, recalling stories. These are about self-healing. Is there a real post-mortem? And I do mean that word explicitly. These are rare. These are the thoughts and prayers we hear about anytime there is a tragedy, calamity, or any loss. Thoughts and prayers. A happy story. Let's all feel better about this. Reflecting sadly on happier times or a happier person may only serve to transfer causation to something unknown, not to be understood. Can you do more? In other words, can you ask the hard questions? And can you take real action when you receive the hard answers? Look around. Is there a person you always hear about, always see doing more than their share, always helping others, always doing the work, always hosting the events, organizing the gatherings, paying for things out of pocket? May not get much more than a pat on the back, maybe a mention, maybe some free press, maybe that's the person always contacted. Maybe that's the person that's so reliable that they will receive more work. They will be asked to do more things. They will be relied on more because they come through. Have you considered sharing some of their load? Have you considered volunteering to help out, to take one end of the couch, so to speak? Could you proactively seek participation in their efforts? Occasionally this happens. Occasionally even the well-known pillars will reach out for people to join in, to take a role, to join a committee, etc. That happens sometimes. But all too often, there is a figurehead, a natural leader, or a leader who has been anointed, a halo placed upon their head or over it. And so those people are often assumed to be doing fine. Look at how much they're doing. They must be okay, and they're succeeding because I'm enjoying my free lunch. It must be great. I'm happy. They must be happy. You've managed to assure yourself that they know what they're doing. They got this. Have you taken note if that person becomes less visible, less present? Maybe they just disappear completely. Maybe you run into the person now and then. They're still smiling, but they're not around anymore. They don't do anything. You can't see anything. They must be on to other things. Maybe they moved away. This is very common in the Vegas area. Have you sought them out to ask them their status? How are you doing? Are you doing okay? Are you healthy? Are you speaking to other people? Are you going outside? Check on their well-being. Or is it the free lunch? Is the free lunch the thing that you are most excited for? And as long as you're still eating, the free lunch is what matters. I've asked about this several times. Again, I've been here for 10 years. I witnessed, not firsthand, obviously, but I witnessed the effects, the impacts on the people of the Downtown Project community, people who took their own lives or were generally unhealthy. Maybe they departed the area. Maybe we haven't even heard some of the stories. Maybe the lasting effects of depression, frustration, disappointment, sadness. Maybe these are long lasting. Maybe PTSD can take other forms, but is caused by many things. Not everything is work. Your startup can wait. It can wait for a day. It can wait for a couple days. Not everyone is for pitching every day. Not every day is for fundraising. Not everything is meant for daily stress. Certainly not everyone. It is okay to take a break. Ask about more than work. If you are always talking about work, about projects, about pitches, about funding, if that is the reason you gather with people each month to be told you're amazing, that you can make money, that you can get rich, you are building the next unicorn, maybe you should try talking and behaving like a human being. Don't ask about money. Ask if they've seen any movies lately. Ask if they've had a coffee. Would they like one? Ask if they've been to the Spring Preserve. Have they been to the Red Rock hiking areas? Have they been to anywhere? Or are they stuck in a pit, in a cave, in the home office? Are they spending all of their time working, not seeing the forest for the trees? And remember, not everything is a transaction. You can ask these questions just because, not because you're looking to hire the person or to have them hire you. You can ask and contact and be involved with people outside of social gatherings. Once a month is okay, but what about just whenever? If you think you are in a community, make community health a community priority. You could call it the buddy system. It has been done, and it can work. Remember that professionals with proper training and resources are always the next steps, though. Trust me, if you find that someone is in a crisis, you will always, and you will all always benefit from not taking this on yourself. There are too many stories of where I should have, if only. I have them myself. We all do, eventually. Seek help. Take advantage of programs. I've had the links above in the show notes. When you find the person that is doing all the work is suddenly not doing anything, if they've disappeared, check in on them. By the way, I'm fine. I myself have stepped away from the startup scene in the greater Vegas area. One of the reasons is this lack of community health. I have a project. I have pitched it, actually, regarding event discovery and communication of gatherings and so on. And I made a point to mention, to include what I called the R weeks. Now, if you are in the service industry or you know someone who is, here in the greater Vegas area, you know that every once in a while there will be and I cannot for the life of me remember what they call it, but it's like the service industry recharge night or recovery or first aid or something like this. Essentially, if you're in the service industry, you come to the pool, you get some sort of gathering where you're like, you know what, put down the shaker, stop serving customers for a minute, just come and relax, recharge. So the R weeks are built in to this plan I've proposed so that people will take time on a commonality basis. That is, other people will also be taking time to just stop working, go see a movie, go have a coffee with someone, and don't talk about work. Go to the Spring Preserve, go on a hike, go ride your bicycle somewhere, go exercise, go see a game, We have plenty of games to watch here now, sports or otherwise. Don't forget that being a part of community could be a transaction. It could be free lunch. It could be following the crowd. And if that's what everybody thinks it is, the bandwagon fallacy, if you are in a community because everybody thinks you are, so be it. However, do be aware, there is a lot of possibility when you are surrounded by people who may have the same fears and concerns, stresses, angst that you do. Sometimes talking like real people will benefit you and them for much longer than you can imagine. Thank you for listening. This is an actual important topic to me, although Pat and I ended things on an extremely and profoundly sour note. I had not spoken with Pat for quite some time, certainly more than 2 years. I want to say pre-pandemic. Yes, pre-pandemic. So it's unfortunate. I do not wish this outcome on anyone, but I can say this person was having a very difficult time. If we only celebrate the things that we liked and remembered about the person in a positive manner, we may miss the opportunities, the unfortunate opportunities that arise, but to take advantage of, to try to make sure this doesn't happen so often. Take a moment to talk to the people around you like they're real human beings and hope that they do the same for you. I'll cut it off there. I'll not include my normal self-promotion this time. Thank you for listening through the first season 0 of the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program. Looking forward to season 1. So that'll be episode 53. And we'll look for some hosts other than me, maybe some co-hosts, maybe some guests. Maybe we'll try to expand the conversation, some other formats and so on. Maybe of this show, but more likely of some other content. And I would absolutely like to focus on people. The impresarios are not companies. They are people. The people that are making things go. Make sure you talk to people more.